Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar coming to you through the International Student Connects project. We're going to talk about traveling outside of Canada as an international student. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background about the project. International Student Connect is a project that is funded by the Government of Ontario, and it is a bilingual project. And we are the coordinating agency. So Costi Immigrant Services is a community-based multicultural agency that serves over 39,000 clients annually. And we do have 17 locations across the Greater Toronto area. So this project was designed to provide support and introduce international students to settlement services so that once you graduate, you actually, or even while you're still in school, you have some level of understanding of how the settlement sector works here in Ontario. We're going to look today at what you need to do before you leave Canada if you're going to travel while you're here, the travel documents that you require, the electronic travel authorization, traveling in North America, your visa requirements, and then what you're going to need coming back to Canada. Now, here is a question for you. What do you think? Do you think you can leave Canada at any time as an international student? Well, here is the answer. Yes, you may leave and return to Canada. So, being an international student in Canada doesn't mean you cannot leave the country at all. You are permitted to leave and return. Now, can you travel with your study permit is another question. Your study permit is not a travel document, which means that it does not expire when you leave the country. Okay, so you cannot use your study permit as your visa to travel to another country. So what documents? This leads me to the question of what documents do you need to exit and re-enter Canada? Your ability to exit and re-enter Canada is based on your passport and the visa status that you currently have. So if you have a passport for a visa-exempt country, you may leave and return. So you may leave and re-enter with your passport. If you need a visa to enter Canada, you must ensure your visa is valid for your re-entry. Now, let's review some of these different things that you're going to need for your travel documents. So you must have the correct travel document if you're going to leave the country. So a valid passport, biometrics. So these are fingerprints and photos if you are familiar with the biometric system. Most students need to give biometrics when they apply for a study permit. And those are used for your visa and your ETA. Biometrics include fingerprints and digital photographs. So if you've had to, when you came to Canada, you may have had to do that. Most students also need an electronic travel authorization, or it's called an ETA. It's more commonly referred to as an ETA. And that is travel authorization if you plan to enter Canada by air. Now, depending on your citizenship, you may also need a visa. So those are things that you need to keep in mind. Now, the biometrics are good for 10 years and they must be submitted before your application is processed. So when we talk about the submission of these, it means that if you are going to try to get travel documents, then you're going to need to submit the biometrics. Now, biometrics are required for all TRV applicants, and your study permit applications, even for those from visa-exempt countries. US citizens do not need the biometrics at all. So if you're a US citizen and you're here in Canada, then you wouldn't need your biometrics. You can visit www.canada.ca, and we've left the link there for you to find additional information on visa exempt and ETA. So what is an ETA? The ETA is the electronic travel authorization that is required for visa-exempt foreign nationals traveling to Canada by air. An ETA is electronically linked to a traveler's passport. So it's not something that you're going to have to hold in your hand. It's actually linked to your passport, and it is valid for up to 5 years or until the passport that you have expires, whichever comes first. Now, who needs one of these? Well, um, ETAs are required. There are several categories. So under the ETA, the the purpose of it is to provide you with information about the visa exempt countries and things like that. So who does need an ETA? Visa exempt foreign nationals need to have one to fly to or transit through Canadian airports. These travelers do not need an ETA when you're arriving by car, bus, train, or boat. Okay, so who needs it? Those who are foreign nationals who do not require a visa to travel to Canada. Is there a cost for the ETA? It's about $7, give or take, and this cost can change depending on what the government decides to do. So currently, we do know that the cost is $7, but we also know that this cost can change at any given time. And how is the payment processed? Well, there is no cash taken for this ETA. You will need to either use your credit card or a Visa debit. So that's kind of convenient, I think, instead of you having to come up with cash and to pay that. What do you need to apply for the ETA? You're going to need your passport, an email address of all your family members. So if you're traveling with more than one family member, you're going to need an email address for more than one, for all of you guys. And you're going to be asked some questions from Immigration and Refugee Citizenship Canada. And there's a bunch of questions on the website that you can kind of go there and take a look at. So do visit the website that is listed here. Now, how to apply for it. This is the process. So you get your passport, your credit card, or your debit card ready. And read the help document. 2, you need a computer because you're going to do it online. Then you'll make your payment of $7, and then you'll get an email that's going to tell you that it has been completed. The process is done. And if they ask you to submit other documents, then you're going to need to do that. If this happens to you, you'll be sent an email with some instructions within 72 hours. So that's a pretty standard formula for doing your ETA application. Now, a temporary resident visa, or a TRV, we talked about that a little bit earlier, is also referred to as a visitor's visa, and it is an official document that is issued by the Canadian Visa Office. That is placed in your passport to show that you have met the requirements for admissions to Canada as a temporary resident. Okay? Now, why would you need a TRV? Now, there are 2 types, right? And if your spouse or your family members are not from visa exempt countries, then you are absolutely going to need a TRV. It's the temporary resident visa application. Okay. Now, what is the duration of the TRVs? There are 2 types, like I mentioned earlier, the single entry, and then there is the multiple visa. For single entry visas, you may only enter Canada once. After you leave Canada, you will not be allowed to re-enter with that single entry visa. With the multiple entry visa, you're able to exit and re-enter. So some people will have multiple indefinite visas that will be for 5 years or 10 years. My friend's mom has a visa that is 10 years. And so because it's valid for 10 years, she can come and go anytime within that 10-year period. Now, what is the difference again between those two? So the multiple entry is usually 10 years. It's usually valid for about 10 years or 1 month before the expiration date on the travel document. In general, multiple entry TRVs allows people to go back and forth every 6 months. Like I mean, you can travel more often than 6 months. However, 6 months is the period of time that you're allowed to stay, the longest, right? So you're in Canada for 6 months, and then you would leave and return again after the 6 month period. All right. Single entry, however, is issued depending on the reason for travel. So if your family member is coming for a short visit, for example, some students will invite their family members for graduation. In this case, they will most often get a single entry visa because it is just for that one occasion. When a single entry visa is issued, the holder of the visa cannot exit and re-enter, like I said earlier. And so if your family member has been issued a single entry visa and the period authorized for their stay in Canada has not ended, they may travel to the United States and back. Or they can go to St. Pierre within the initial authorized period. So what does that mean? That means if you got a single entry visa, let's say you invited your dad for your graduation, or you invited your dad to come and visit because you're not feeling well, and they decided that they were going to come, and they were issued a single entry visa, and that visa was for, let's say, 4 months. Within that 4 month period or 6 month period, they're able to travel back and forth to the US and back to Canada with that visa. But once they leave Canada, they are not allowed to re enter Canada, if that makes sense. Now, excuse me, United States residents are, if you're a US resident, is a visa required for you. Now, lawful permanent residents of the United States do not need a visa to enter Canada. So, when you're entering Canada, if you are a lawful permanent resident of the United States, you must have a valid passport and proof of your status in the US, such as a green card. You can travel to Canada. You don't need an ETA to enter Canada at a land or sea border. However, if you are going to fly here, then yes, you will need an ETA to do so. The length of stay is determined by the Border Services Officer. It is therefore useful if you've got family members um, that they present both a copy of your study permit and your letter of introduction. This helps to inform the officer of the purpose and the intent, and how long that you intend to stay. So that is something that you absolutely need to do when you are coming across from the US if you're a United States citizen. Now, United States citizens do not need a visa or ETA to enter Canada. US citizens must carry a valid US passport to enter Canada and to re enter the United States. So if you're listening and you're one of those people who are from the United States, then please know that you do need, if you are a citizen, that you do need to have your passport in order to enter Canada and then go back to the US. The length of stay is generally 6 months and work is not allowed. So you would need to apply for a work permit after your arrival in Canada. This again is for those who are US citizens. Your family members should also present a copy of your study permit and a letter of invitation to request an extended length of stay if they're going to be coming with you. Now let's talk about some quick things to know. A study permit is not a travel document, but you already know that, right? Okay. Now, visa-exempt passports need an ETA. Okay, so that's just to recap. If you come from a country where you're visa exempt, then you do need to have an ETA. Multiple entry visas allows exit and re-entry. What are those? The multiple entry is usually about 10 years long, and you can enter and exit Canada, usually within the course of a 6 month period. That's the longest length of stay you can, where you can stay. The visa officer will usually determine how long you're going to be staying in the country before you leave. US residents may need an ETA. And when do they need an ETA? Yes, if they are traveling by air. US citizens now, they only need a passport, and your biometrics may be needed. So keep all of that in mind. Traveling in North America. So Canadians visit the United States very often. That's something that we tend to do. We tend to go there and shop and spend time. Most of us will go for shopping sometimes for short periods of time. Um, Most people in Canada live within a few hundred kilometers of the border with the United States, and we often drive across the border for day-long trips. And you can also take a bus. Just one moment, please. I just need to have a sip of water. So sometimes we have bus trips that will go to the US. And of course, you can fly to the US. It is from most major airports in Canada. Now, the Caribbean and Mexico are also popular destinations, and I know that a lot of students tend to want to go on March breaks and things like that. The Caribbean and Mexico are places that most people go and spend holidays, especially in the wintertime, because of their popularity. You may find that flights to Mexico and the Caribbean and cities in the United States cost less than flights across Canada, which is kind of weird. To me, it's just crazy weird. Like traveling to, let's say, Florida, for example, would cost me about $900, whereas traveling to Jamaica would cost me about 400 to 500, sometimes $600 maximum. So to me, that just it's kind of just weird, but I'm not really sure why that happens. Now, Canada and the United States share the largest undefended border in the world. Just in case you didn't know that, I'm just going to toss that out for you a little bit. Now, you may also cross the border through a customs and immigration checkpoint. These checkpoints are located on highways, bridges, and seaports along ferry docks and stuff. So you must, if you're going to go to the US, you must cross at a legal checkpoint. They're going to ask for your passport at the checkpoint, so be prepared to show that. If you've got goods and stuff in your bag, like for example, when I travel, I take food stuff. Like I don't really like to buy food on the road, so I will take like my apples and oranges and different kinds of things to eat. They do ask you at the border, what do you have in your car if you're driving across? And you need to declare those things. Now, prepare to answer questions at the checkpoint. They ask multiple questions, not necessarily hard questions, and it's not something to be afraid of. They're usually very simple questions like, what are you going to do in the US today? When do you plan to return? Do you have family? Are you visiting family? Where are you staying? Things like that. So just be prepared for those questions. Citizens and permanent residents of both countries cross the border every day for business and pleasure. We do it on and off. So it's not a difficult process whatsoever, nothing to be alarmed about. Now, US and Canada have different requirements for entry. So before you plan a trip to the United States, you should always ensure that you have the right to enter the US. Otherwise, you'll get to the border and they'll turn you away. Now, I don't know, some of you may be permanent residents right now. I mean, because a lot of international students do convert to permanent residents after they've lived permanent convert to a permanent resident after they have lived in this country for some time. Now, as a permanent resident of Canada, you do not have the same right of entry to the United States as a Canadian citizen. So you're going to need to show your passport, and you do need to have a visa to travel to the US if you are a permanent resident. Just in case, I mean, I don't know if there's any international student here who's converted to a permanent resident. The United States and Canada work together on border security. So this is something that is very common, but they also do have different rules when it comes to the regulations at the border. Like Canada, the United States has a visa exempt system for visitors from some countries and requires visas for visitors from other countries. However, the list of countries are not always the same. So if you go on the Canadian website and you look at the immigration website and you think, okay, so these are the countries that are visa exempt for Canada, it may not necessarily be the same for the US. So you do need to go and visit their website to try and figure out if you are from a visa exempt country. Now, we do have the website here. It's www.state.gov/travelers backslash. Go to the State Department's website to learn more about whether or not you would be visa exempt if you qualify for the visa waiver program that they have. All right. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Visa Waiver Program very quickly. The Visa Waiver Program allows citizens of certain countries to travel to the United States without a visa for about 90 days. Who is eligible for that? Now, within those 90 days, um, I think it'd be useful to say that the visa waiver program enables most citizens or nationals of participating countries to travel to the U.S. states for tourism or business for about 90 days. After the 90 days, you do have to go home. It applies to both business trips and tourism. Now, travelers must have a valid electronic system, and they call it the ESTA. So they have the electronic systems for travel authorization, and that must be approved prior to traveling. Okay. So, who's eligible for the visa waiver program? Those people who are traveling for business and you're from a country that in is a part of this program. If you prefer to have a visa in your passport, and you don't want to just use the ESTA, then you may still apply for a visitor's B visa for that purpose. Now, you can go to their website. It's listed here. It's esta.cbp.dhs.gov/ESTA/. And you'll find additional information. Now, how can you travel on the visa waiver program? In order to travel without a visa on the visa waiver program, you must have authorization through the electronic system for travel authorization prior to boarding a US bound air or a sea carrier. So note that you need to have the authorization to do this before you get on that flight. Don't get on the flight thinking that it's going to be okay, because it may not be. Excuse me. What is the ESTA? The ESTA is a web-based system that is operated by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Services to determine eligibility to travel under the visa waiver program. How are the applications completed? You do have to complete these applications online on their website at the Customs and Border Protection's website. And do they expire? They are valid in most cases. It'll be valid for about 2 years. All right. So this again is something that you absolutely need to check out before you go. This webinar is giving you high level information. We're not going into a lot of details. Now, what are the passport requirements for the ESTA? You must have a passport that is valid for at least 6 months after your planned departure from the United States, unless you're from one of those exempted countries and have an e-passport to qualify for the visa waiver and ESTA in the United States. So see what they're saying. It must be valid. Your passport has to be valid for up to 6 months after your planned date to leave. So if I plan to leave in December, my passport should be valid from December 6 months from December. So I need to have a passport that's valid all the way up until about May. Why do they require an e-passport? It is their enhanced security system. So it's an enhanced secure passport with an embedded electronic chip, and it is required to be scanned to match the identity of you, the traveler, or your family member if that's who's traveling. And we ask the question, what are the benefits of traveling with an e-passport? Well, e-passports help securely identify you and protect you against identity theft, protect your privacy, and make it kind of difficult to alter documents for use, to, let's say that it's a scam or whatever. It's kind of a little bit more difficult. Well, I don't know if I want an e-passport though. I think I want to keep my passport that I have. I like it. If you are not from a country that is included in the US's visa waiver program, oh, that's a very big tongue twister, visa waiver program. You need to apply for a visa to visit the United States. And this is called the non-immigrant visa. And that allows you to visit the US temporarily. Now, they have a few different types of visas. So they've got a B1, a B2, and a C visa. So let's talk about their B1 visa. The B1 visa is for business, such as attending conferences. If you are going to travel to do some work there, then you need the B1 visa. The B2 visa is for tourism or medical treatment. I'm hoping that none of you would ever need to go get medical treatment. I hope you stay healthy for a very long time. But if you're going to travel as a tourist, then and you're not under the visa waiver program, then you do need to have your one of these visas. And then the C visa is for transit, when you need to travel through the United States en route to another destination. So let's say, for example, you're an international student, you're going to be going from Canada to, let's say, for example, Dubai, and you're traveling through the US to get to Dubai, then this would be something that you would absolutely need to have. Now, there is a DS form that is completed and submitted online. Um, so this form is for temporary travel to the US. You see, there's a bit of paperwork that is required when you're traveling to the United States. Now, what do you need? You need your passport, you need an itinerary. If you already made travel arrangements, dates of your last 5 visits or trips to the United States. I'm not really sure why that is required, but again, these are their rules. If you have previously traveled to the United States, you may also be asked for your international travel history for the past 5 years. And some of them will ask you for your resume. Like, it's kind of crazy. So you do need to keep all of this in mind when you are traveling to the US. Some applicants, depending on the intended purpose of travel, will also be asked to provide additional information when you're completing the DS-160 form. And an interview is required to obtain the non-immigrant visa. So visit their website or one of their embassy websites, and you can get additional information on that. The application process for the visa after you arrive in Canada through the US Embassy and the consulates in Canada. So, to be granted a visa, you'll need to be interviewed by a consular official at one of the consulates. You may schedule the appointment at whichever one of the consulates are closest to you. So, I'm here in Toronto. I would go to the one in Toronto. You must complete the application online and then schedule an interview appointment. You'll be asked to pay the standard application fee upon completion of the application, and you may pay using your Visa or your MasterCard. If you want to learn more, please do visit the websites that are listed here for more information. Now, if you need additional information about any of this stuff, go to Immigration and Citizenship Canada's website. It's www.cic.gc.ca. You can also visit the Canadian Border Services Agency's website and the U.S. State Department's website for additional information. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about our project before you go on the tools that we have for you. So we've got our website. It's www.internationalstudentconnect.org. Once again, that is www.internationalstudentconnect.org. On our website, we do have a multitude of um, stuff that you can use, resources that are there for you. So we have a transition plan. The transition plan is a tool that helps you to track your tasks and schedules, your deadlines that you've got when, let's say, for example, you were planning to leave Canada, or you were planning to remain in Canada after you have finished studying, then absolutely what you can do is you can use this transition plan and it will help you to structure your time. And let's say when you're going to leave, when you're going to stay, if you're planning to stay, you will need to have a certain amount of money. It will help you to plan out all of that. So that's something to look forward to on our website. And we've got a whole bunch of other webinars there as well that you can click into. Our YouTube channel, it will guide you straight to the YouTube channel where you can watch the webinars at your own leisure. International Student Connect. If you want to contact us, the number is 1-844-871-4567, or you can email us at isc@costi.org. We look forward to hearing from you, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today on today's webinar. If you do have additional questions and you'd like to get in touch with us, once again, please do forward us an email at isc@costi.org. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you in our other webinars. Thank you so much.